Although there are many fans of Call of Duty, there are perhaps more haters than ever before, which is why I'm shying away from making a positive perspective video about them. On the other hand, it is one of the giants of the industry, so I have to mention it at some point. I decided I would make a video to inform rather than criticise, so that my head doesn't get bludgeoned to the point of looking like a pale Crash Bandicoot. On that note, let's talk about the technical troubles of Call of Duty. People know Call of Duty for its fast-paced gameplay, action set pieces, and generally prepubescent fanbase, but its beginnings were far more humble. A small team of hopefuls was employed by Activision after they finished work on Medal of Honor Allied Assault, to create a new game set in World War II. However, there simply wasn't enough time or people to make an engine from scratch, so they resorted to using id Tech 3, an engine loved during the late 90s and early 2000s due to its ease of use, graphical abilities and networking capabilities. Although this decision was a matter of short-term convenience, you will be shocked to know that the latest version of the engine still uses code from id Tech 3. That's code that was made in 1999, 18-year-old tech in a brand new game. Mind you, we all share a lot in common with Lewis Hamilton, but that doesn't stop people from crashing into the bollards of a car park. Infinity Ward developed and improved the engine by introducing DirectX 9 support by the time the first entry was released in 2003. This meant that the task of rendering the game was split between the processor and graphics card more effectively than with the previous OpenGL based system. The result was better performance, allowing for better visuals and larger scale levels across the board. If the team could do this in such a short space of time, they were sure to introduce some pretty groundbreaking things when given a long period to develop a sequel in. However, the game was only available on PC at the time, and Activision being Activision had $signs in their crosshairs as the Xbox 360 was nearing release. It was obvious from a business perspective to reduce the development time on Call of Duty 2, so that it would release alongside the console. We are all familiar with Activision stifling a studio's creativity for the sake of some money, but Infinity Ward would have none of it. In just 2 years, they released Call of Duty 2 onto the Xbox 360 and PC with a host of technical improvements. One of the biggest introductions was unified lighting, meaning the position of shadows in relation to light and objects could change in real time as opposed to being fixed in place. This may sound falsely positive, but this was a big step forward at the time for such a highly detailed game running on a console. Another big step was the use of normal mapping. This involves faking the amount of polygons present in an object by projecting an image of a much higher quality model over the top. Think of it like putting Benedict Cumberbatch's face on Kanye West's body. It won't make him any more intelligent, but at least it will look better. This is used primarily in bumps or dents, a very common feature in a World War II shooter, and helped maintain the series' consistent 60 frames per second target. Finally, post-effects were added such as heat haze that was seen a lot in the desert levels, and bloom lighting to make it look more cinematic. You see, a game can be cinematic and 60 frames a second. Who would have thought? Now that Call of Duty 2 had established some great features to use on a new generation of consoles, it was only natural that the next entry would make use of it. Treyarch took over development of Call of Duty 3 at the request of Activision, who were hungry for more money. The publisher decided to release a new entry in the series every year, and let the developers of Spider-Man 2 accompany Infinity Ward in this task. The problem is, Treyarch was using their own proprietary engine, which meant they couldn't cooperate with Infinity Ward on improving either engine's feature set. The biggest plus point of this though, is this was the first time a main entry in the series was seen on PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. However, it didn't appear on PC at all for unknown reasons, likely money related. Although Call of Duty would see a few more low points in the series, Call of Duty 3's quality was excusable after the release of Infinity Ward's next project, a title they were begging Activision to release since they first signed a publishing deal with them. A first-person shooter about modern warfare, imaginatively called Call of Duty Modern Warfare. The game was a giant success and turned the series into the juggernaut we know today, but why? Well, it offered a sense of spectacle that can only be achieved by having a few Jack Daniels and Cokes, then deciding to make a quiche at 3 in the morning. It would have been hard to achieve these iconic scenes successfully without the use of new technology though, so let's look at that. Bullet penetration was finally introduced to many people's delight. Although bullet impact textures were present in the old games, bullets didn't travel through or affect props in any way, meaning a cup of tea could have been a fitting shield in this alternate World War II. The Battlefield games may have pushed the boat out with destructible environments, but penetration was all we needed, in the most mature way possible. Then, there was the new physics system that meant enemies would turn into ragdolls upon death in a manner similar to Half-Life 2 from way back in 2004. When coupled with the improved AI, the game felt so much more authentic than the previous titles, regardless if you have ever tried to defuse a nuke held by a group of terrorists in real life or not. Then there were improvements to lighting, shadows and particle resolution, as you'd expect from a game released 2 years after Call of Duty 2. Could you imagine if they released a game that looked worse than one of the previous entries? That would be ridiculous. Anyway, moving on. My personal favourite in this series came out in 2008 in the form of World at War. The series returned to the World War II setting with a host of improvements applied to Infinity Ward's engine. Generalised improvements to destructibility, physics and ragdolls came in addition to dismemberment. Sometimes I question whether I am the smallest bit psychopathic based on how much I enjoyed the dismemberment in this game. It's probably nothing. Another feature for like-minded psychopaths was a series of shaders that made clothes and skin deform realistically as it burns. If that wasn't enough, they also enhanced the fire effects greatly so that they were spread naturally, showing off the deliciously gory effects it can have on the enemies. Other than this, it was a fairly iterative entry in terms of technology and setting, something that would become standard in the coming years. Every year, Activision would flaunt their slightly polished version of the engine as if Battlefield didn't exist. The textures stayed the same quality, the lighting was fairly similar and AI remained the same. My hope began to fade for the series in terms of its revolutionary contribution to the genre, but then came Black Ops 2. My goodness, this game looked good. Considering that the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 had been out at least 6 years, they managed to find untapped potential inside them to create one truly beautiful game. It had bounce lighting, which allowed light to reflect from one surface to another, HDR lighting for greater colour accuracy, self-shadowing, intersecting shadows, lens flare, reveal mapping to alter object properties depending on the lighting conditions. Damn, they really love their lighting. Better audio, better water, and DirectX 11 support on PC for better performance. Christ on a bike, that is a lot of stuff. Don't worry though, Infinity Ward was sure to balance out the major increase in graphical quality by making their next game as ugly as Kanye West without Benedict Cumberbatch's face. I'm not even sure we should use the name Infinity Ward for the creator of Ghost, because by this point, all the founder members were gone on their long crusade to the land of EA. I'm glad though, as they don't have to be associated with this utterly dreary excuse of a game. For all the technical improvements they made to the engine, they ruined it by focusing on a drab colour palette. The engine had improved HDR lighting at this point and they didn't bloody use it. I felt like I was playing the game in black and white for the majority of the campaign. Despite the hateful aesthetic choices, the technological improvements played a role in later entries of the series. Better animations for movement, interactive particle effects, tessellation meant the polygon count of objects could be increased after the assets were created, and they made use of Pixar's sub-D technology, so that the polygon count would reduce effectively at a distance without the player noticing. The result was smoother performance, supposedly, but this didn't stop the frame rate from jumping up and down like a kitten on catnip. It's advised to forget this game ever happened and jump straight to the next entry. Sledgehammer may not have been new to the Call of Duty franchise, as they had a hand in Modern Warfare 3's development, but this was their first solo venture into the world of Call of Duty. They took no chances in making sure they did it right, so Activision shared their bucket of gold with them so that they could spend 3 years making a drastically improved engine. The result was a beautifully crisp and realistic looking game, if you ignore the nanobugs, and jumpsuits, and laser guns, and almost everything. It also made use of a fairly new form of anti-aliasing known as TAA, in conjunction with the well-established FXAA. Previous entries used FXAA on console, which equates to putting Vaseline on the screen to blur jagged edges, and the framerate destroying MSAA on PC, whereas TAA used information from previous frames to locate and eliminate visual shimmer. It may be slightly more taxing than FXAA, but it is far more efficient than MSAA. The final form of anti-aliasing, on the other hand, SSAA, increases the render resolution of the game beyond the native resolution of the display, therefore removing a lot of visual aliasing. In addition to this, texture and shadow quality was dramatically better than it was before, resulting in a very clean image. Not much is really known about the engine beyond these improvements though, as Treyarch was quick to return to Infinity Ward's aging tech. Yes, Black Ops 3's graphics took a step back from the progress of Advanced Warfare. Not as big a step back as Ghost, but a backward step from one end of Russia to the other would be smaller than that of Ghost. It's at least introduced dynamic water physics, and it still looks reasonable for 2015, but it still seemed like a downgrade from a technical point of view. Luckily, Treyarch followed their trusted aesthetic choices that made use of the HDR lighting capabilities, and the result was a more varied and colourful looking game than the previous entry. Also, there were plenty of improvements to be made the following year with Infinite Warfare. Despite breaking the wrong kind of records, the game turned out to be a respectful technical achievement on several levels. It utilised DirectX 12 for improved performance by utilising the hardware more efficiently. There was physically based rendering resulting in more realistic looking objects in relation to light sources. better AI, better asset streaming, and zero gravity physics for some levels. This could be considered a fault by Battlefield fanboys at the time, but it's there if you want it. It's a real shame that most people view this game so poorly because Infinity Ward did the best they could with the setting they were likely given by Activision. At least Activision took notice of their fanbase, or likely their dwindling money, and are set to give us a game that takes us back rather than forward. And that concludes this video on Call of Duty's technical troubles. What are your favourite Call of Duty games? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.